Hello, everyone. This is Tom Painter again, and I'm so excited to be talking to you about real estate. Now, all of you have to have a place to live. It's one of the great areas that all of you should be investing in. Now, most people say, well, I own real estate because I live in the real estate. Well, that's nice, but you're the one that's making the payment on it. If you want to build extra wealth, you need to invest in things that go up in value. The reason things go up in value is because the governments of the world can't pay their bills. So what do? They print more money. So if you own assets that bring in income, we call that an income producing asset. And it will go up in value. It appreciates because we appreciate it. And it appreciates because it goes up in value. Now, the flip side of that is that inflation is when you're renting. You're the one that's renting, and it costs you more every year because of inflation. So there's two sides of that coin. Somebody gets it, somebody pays it. One of my dad's favorite quotes was, "Them's that understands it, gets it. Them's that don't, pays it." So we want you to understand about this. And this is one of the ways that we have made our wealth is with real estate. It's a big part of that. And we've done a whole bunch of properties we fixed up and flipped. And it doesn't matter if it's real estate or if you're selling cars or whatever you're doing. I love real estate because it is so stable. It doesn't move. It's not like a car that moves somewhere. You can put a couple $1,000s into cleaning up and repainting and getting all the weeds out of the yard, and without spending a lot of money, you can really make a property look so much better. Whereas, you can put thousands of dollars into a car to make it run better, but nobody will really know it. So that's why I like real estate so much. So we're going to be talking about foreclosures. We've done a lot of foreclosures in my lifetime, a lot of flippers where we flip properties. And I'm so excited and so grateful for Robert Allan with his book, Multiple Streams of Income. As you know, many of my properties are in many of these books, and Bob is a great friend of the foundation. And so if Robert's around, let's bring him on. Let's talk a little bit about foreclosures and flippers with real estate. Take it away, Robert.
Chapter 9. Your Fifth Stream, A Fortune in Foreclosures and Flippers. In Chapter 8, we learned how to find, fund, and farm real estate bargains. I spent so much time teaching you about creative financing that I didn't make a clear distinction between Stream 4 and Stream 5. Stream 4 is buy and hold real estate. In this chapter, I'll teach you about Stream 5, buying and flipping. The main distinction between these two streams is time, long-term versus short-term. Before I launch into the full-blown discussion of short-term flips, I want to remind you of the power of a long-term buy and hold approach, Stream 4. It's very similar to the Warren Buffett buy and hold approach in the stock market. If you're fully vested in a property through long periods of time, you'll eventually participate in every major move in price appreciation. For example, since my book was published, there have been many ups and downs in the real estate market. During these ups and downs, real estate investors tend to make the same mistakes that stock market investors make. They buy when everyone is excited, buy high, and sell when blood is running in the streets, sell low. Then they have the audacity to say, "I've tried real estate, didn't work for me." Nobody makes money by buying high and selling low. As in the markets, you need to be buying when the sheep are selling, and selling when the sheep are buying. The statement I made in my first book still holds true. Don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. A 24-year-old young man named Tom Painter came to one of my seminars. This is how he recalls it. Being a college student, I didn't have the financial resources, such as credit and money, to invest in property. With only a dream and desire, I started my investment career. It took me a year to find a property that I could buy with a small down payment. I was running ads in the paper when I received a call from the owner of a 4-unit apartment building. He was an older gentleman who was tired of the management. He had purchased it many years earlier, and the property was free and clear of all loans. We negotiated a price with $5,000 down. Instead of going to the bank and obtaining new financing, he agreed to carry the contract for 15 years at 10% interest. I would make payments directly to him. Since my first mortgage payment wasn't due for 30 days, I was able to use the rents and deposits toward the down payment. 15 years later, through the ups and downs of the real estate market, the loan was eventually paid off. Today, it's free and clear of all loan. Better still, it pumps out cash every single month. Same strategy, just add zeros. I came across a similar situation. The seller had purchased an apartment complex 10 years earlier and had experienced a nice profit. He had grown tired of the management. The property consisted of 7 buildings with a value of $1.8 million. We negotiated a purchase price of $1,650,000 with nothing down. He got his price and I got my terms. We have improved the properties and increased the rents. If all goes well, the properties will be paid for in 22 years. I've been asked why I would put up with the hassle of rental units. The answer is simple. I have a big why. My son is 10 years old and is autistic. My son will need financial help his entire life. In 1993, at the age of 34, I had a heart attack. This was a major wake-up call for me. My son will outlive me by at least 30 to 40 years. I am trying to put systems in place to take care of my family if something happens to me. If you have a big enough why, you will figure out a how. His long-term real estate strategy, Stream 4, has paid off handsomely, but the short-term strategy has its place as well. What creates short-term bargains? Real estate is illiquid. In other words, it can't be sold quickly. The stock market, by contrast, is liquid. If you buy a stock this minute, you can resell it 30 seconds later. Because real estate is slow to sell, smart real estate investors can earn huge profits by assuming the risk of illiquidity. We know that, given enough time, a property we buy below the market today can eventually be remarketed for a profit. In the meantime, we may have to make monthly payments, resolve a bad tenant situation, upgrade or renovate the property, resolve a zoning issue, or find a solution to a myriad of other problems. In other words, we make money by solving problems. The more problems we solve, the more money we make. In Chapter 8, we learned of at least 20 problems that may force people to sell their property. The more desperate people become, the quicker they need a sale, and the more flexible they will become. The only way to effect a quick sale is to do one of two things: lower the price or come up with attractive financial terms, such as a low down payment. As a real estate bargain hunter, you must have something at wholesale, price or terms, and preferably both. If not, don't buy. More bargains are available in the area of foreclosures than any other area of real estate. Bargain opportunity 1. Foreclosures. Why would individuals walk away from perfectly good property? Why would they be willing to risk ruining their credit rating? Why would they face the embarrassment of having to be forced out of their home? Well, for whatever reason. According to the Mortgage Bankers Association, over 400,000 homes went into foreclosure last year. That's over 33,500 a month in North America. How many of those do you need to buy to earn enough profit to equal or exceed your current year's salary? Just one. One good property bought and sold could support you for a year. In fact, if you persist long enough, I believe you'll find at least one bargain property that's good enough to set you up for life. But you're probably not willing to believe that yet. So let's lower the expectations and assume that sometime in the next 5 years, with consistent searching, you'll find one excellent property that you can buy at 20% below the market. Do you think that's realistic? Even if real estate is not your thing, you should at least be willing to learn a few basics so you can buy your personal residence at a substantial discount. Bargain hunting in foreclosures. One of the most effective ways to find a wholesale property is to look for foreclosures. When property owners fail to make the monthly payments on their mortgages, their loans become delinquent. Each lending institution has different guidelines for handling delinquencies. It usually starts with a nice reminder letter, asking the customer to bring his or her payment up to date. This is followed by a series of increasingly threatening letters leading up to a formal notice of default. Depending on where you live, the time frame between the notice of default and the actual foreclosure sale can be 90 to 365 days. There may also be a period of redemption after the foreclosure sale. Generally speaking, however, most states have a 90-day foreclosure process with no redemption period. After missing a payment, most homeowners are technically 90 days away from losing their home. There are 4 important phases in the foreclosure process. Pre-sale, before the lender files the notice of default at the courthouse. Pre-sale, after the lender files the notice of default. At the foreclosure sale, and post-sale. Pre-sale, before notice of default. Each phase has its advantages and its disadvantages. For example, the least competition will occur before the bank files a notice of default. In essence, the only people who know of the delinquency are the lender and the property owner. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to find these people. You have to flush them out with your own ads in the newspaper and your own bird dogging. Pre-sale, after notice of default. After the notification has been filed at the courthouse, it becomes a matter of public record. There are several foreclosure service companies that search out these notifications and sell a subscription to those who are willing to pay for this information. Generally, the sellers become increasingly flexible as the foreclosure date draws near. Still, there are other buyers to compete with. At the foreclosure sale. If the property makes it to the foreclosure sale, you have only one option, to pay off the mortgage holder in full. Therefore, it takes a lot of cash to be bidding at a foreclosure sale. If you win the bid, you have only a short time to pay for the property. I encourage you to visit your courthouse, find out when the next foreclosure sale takes place, and show up to watch. You'll find many of the properties due to be sold that day have been withdrawn for various reasons. Of the properties remaining, the vast majority have little equity. The loans and legal fees equal or exceed the value, and therefore no one bids on them, and the lending institution takes them back. A small number of properties are really worth bidding on. Occasionally there is an exceptional bargain. Sometimes you end up in a bidding war with another investor. One of my beginning students began bidding with a seasoned investor. When the bidding stopped, my young student had won the bid. He was then approached by the seasoned investor, who made him an immediate cash offer of $2,000 to take over his position on the property. He accepted $2,000 in cash for 15 minutes of work. I don't recommend attempting to buy your properties at a foreclosure sale, but it is instructive to watch what goes on. Post-sale. Once lenders have foreclosed on the property, those lenders become remarkably more flexible. Now it's their problem and they want to get rid of it. They actually show many signs of don't-wanteritis. They can even be convinced, under the right circumstances, to sell the property to you for less than the mortgage. This is referred to in the industry as a short sale. For instance, suppose a lender foreclosed on a $100,000 house with a $95,000 mortgage. If no one bids at the auction, the lender gets the house back. Many times the lender will consider an offer for less than $95,000 and take a loss to get rid of it. You can buy foreclosures in any of these stages, pre- and post-sale. Let me give you some real examples. Some of the amounts in these examples have been adjusted for ease of illustration. Case Study 1. Pre-foreclosure before notification of default. One of my students, Jim, in Florida, located an excellent property by calling on lending institutions and asking if they had any delinquent loans. He found a small lending institution that had a troublesome loan on a small strip center, a few retail stores in a commercial area. The lender's representatives had tried to legally serve the owner of the property with a notice of default, but had been unable to find him. They indicated to Jim that if he succeeded in finding the seller, they might be willing to help him purchase the property if it became available. The loan was approximately $375,000 on a property worth about $750,000. The loan payments were delinquent by about $25,000. Jim began his detective work and finally located the seller in the Cayman Islands. The seller had essentially abandoned the property. Jim asked the seller what he might need for his equity. The seller said he would be happy with anything. How about $7,000 in cash? Jim explained that the papers would be overnighted to the Cayman Islands, and on receipt of the seller's signature, the $7,000 would be wired to the seller's bank to complete the transaction. Therefore, Jim had the potential of acquiring $350,000 in equity for only $7,000 in cash. He approached the lender, who agreed to add the back payments, $25,000, to the original loan, $375,000, and give Jim a new loan in the amount of $400,000. So the bank situation was taken care of. But the $7,000 down payment was a problem. Jim didn't have it. That's where his understanding of creative financing saved the day. There were dozens of ways to raise the $7,000, and Jim came up with his own extremely creative solution. He discovered in his analysis of the property that the electric company was holding a $7,000 security deposit to secure the tenant's utility bill. He asked the electric company if it might accept a lower security deposit and release some of these funds. The company replied that it would release all the funds if Jim would post a surety bond for the whole amount. What's surety bond? A surety bond is like an insurance policy. It bonds or insures the electric company in the event tenants default on their utility bills. How much does it cost? In this case, less than $500. At the closing, here is what transpired. Jim bought a surety bond for $500. This satisfied the electric company, which released the $7,000 in cash. This was used as Jim's down payment. The delinquent owner had already signed the papers to sell his building pending the receipt of $7,000. The money from the electric company was sent to the delinquent seller in the Cayman Islands. Jim walked out of the closing as the proud owner of an excellent property with an instant $350,000 equity profit. This is an example of buying a bargain property before the notification of default. Case Study 2. Pre-foreclosure after notification of default. One of my favorite graduates is a woman from the Los Angeles area. The last time we talked, she and her husband were successfully buying 4 to 5 foreclosures a year. One of her most profitable deals was a pre-foreclosure with an existing loan balance of approximately $17,000. With further checking, she determined that the home was in a neighborhood of homes in the $150,000 to $200,000 range. There was a huge potential for equity profit in this property. She inspected the home and found it in deplorable condition. Maybe this is why the neighbors never bothered to check it out. It was inhabited by 3 teenagers whose parents had recently passed away. When she visited the home, the young boys showed her piles of unopened letters from the bank that they didn't know what to do with. These were the foreclosure notices. She informed the boys that they were within days of the foreclosure. It was almost too late. They needed to act immediately. Because of her trustworthy demeanor, the boys turned their affairs over to her, and she proceeded to stop the foreclosure. Then she arranged for enough money to complete a total renovation of the property. There were holes in the walls, broken windows, motorcycle tracks in the lawn, a mess. She involved the teenagers in the fix-up process, and several months later the property was sold and the $100,000 profit was divided up among the teenage boys and the Good Samaritan investor. Without her, there was no doubt that these boys would have been thrown into the street with nothing. Every time I think of this woman, I am reminded that real estate investors can not only be problem solvers, but saviors as well. Case Study 3. Buying properties at the foreclosure sale. Several years ago, I held a foreclosure seminar in Baltimore. In Maryland, foreclosure sales take place on the steps of the property to be foreclosed, as opposed to the courthouse steps in other states. We arranged to take the entire class to a live foreclosure sale. We arrived at the scheduled foreclosure sale with 2 minibuses full of people. The only other people there were the auctioneer and the solitary investor, a Mr. Rockhind. Needless to say, he was very disappointed to see us arrive, because he assumed we would be bidding against him. He was relieved to learn that we were there only to observe. He proceeded to buy the property for a minimum bid, and a substantial profit. The whole affair lasted only a few minutes. After the sale, we began to question the investor. After some coaxing, we learned that he was the largest single owner of real estate homes in the entire state of Maryland, with over 3,000 single-family homes in his portfolio. For 25 years, he had been buying properties at foreclosures and had amassed a huge net worth. Many of the homes were free and clear of mortgages, which generated a massive positive cash flow. To our delight, Mr. Rockhind agreed to attend our class, and he spent several hours sharing his vast experience and wisdom with us. It was an unforgettable demonstration of the power of pursuing a single profitable strategy over a long period of time. I couldn't have scripted it better. Case Study 4. Buying properties post-foreclosure. One of my students, John Burley, was a financial planner in the San Francisco area. After attending my seminar, he moved to Phoenix. He began to buy VA foreclosures using a unique strategy. Rather than buying and holding each property, he immediately flipped each one. Here was the typical deal. John purchased a home valued at $80,000 from the government's Veterans Administration in foreclosure for $60,000 with a small down payment. He then ran an ad in a newspaper offering to resell the home for $80,000 with only $900 down. This attracted many calls. John's profit came in the form of payments on a wraparound mortgage that John would carry back. This may not seem like much of a profit until you learn that John was buying and flipping 4 to 5 houses a month. The last time I talked to him, he had purchased and flipped more than 800 homes in this manner. In each instance, he carried back a wraparound mortgage with monthly payments. His accumulated equities in these wraparound mortgages totaled millions of dollars, with a cash flow of tens of thousands of dollars a month. Admittedly, this took several years of concentrated, dedicated effort, but you can't deny that it was a powerful way to create residual income. Here's another example from Bob Shoemaker in Georgia. I specialize in foreclosures and tax deeds. I learned about this house in Macon, Georgia, by attending a foreclosure sale at the county courthouse. The house had for $108,000. Following the foreclosure, I negotiated a short sale purchase from the lender in June for $91,000, with the lender paying most of the closing costs. After I invest about $8,000 in painting and other repairs, the house should be worth $120,000 or more. By using an existing home equity line of credit for my down payment, I was able to buy the property without any cash outlay. One good property can set you up for life. One of my students in Chicago, Candace, found an exceptional bargain property as a result of a tip from a friend at church. She immediately drove over to look at the property after church and discovered a completely renovated older apartment building in excellent condition. She began her research by calling in the number on the for sale sign. She learned that it was a property being liquidated in the collapse of a local savings and loan. After borrowing a large amount of money to renovate these units, the builder had defaulted on his loan. The property had reverted to the S&L through foreclosure. Then the S&L had gone belly up. A government agency was given the task of liquidating the remaining properties. There was an extensive appraisal on the property indicating a value of $950,000, although Candace felt that the appraisal was much too conservative. Candace made an immediate offer of $550,000 cash in 30 days, $10,000 in earnest money, and no contingencies except the right to inspect the property before closing. Her offer was accepted almost immediately. With the 30-day closing looming, she arranged for her banker to look at the property. Because of a well-established relationship, he agreed to lend her $650,000 against the property on the strength of the $950,000 appraisal. At the closing, she walked out with a check for $100,000. The property had a built-in equity of at least $300,000 and a healthy positive cash flow. Imagine that. Excellent property, cash at closing, built-in equity, powerful positive cash flow. It doesn't get any better than this. At a brunch meeting in Chicago, Candace shared with me that this one property was probably going to set her up for life. I have often told my students that if they'll pursue these strategies for a 5-year period of time, they too will uncover a property that has the potential to set them up for life. It may happen in the 2nd year or the 5th year, but eventually that once-in-a-lifetime deal will present itself. You just have to be ready when your opportunity arrives. I hope you find yours sooner than later. Bargain Opportunity 2. Flippers. In Chapter 7 on options in the stock market, I related an example of a nice profit I earned by buying a 1-year option on some raw acreage. In buying this option, I signed an option agreement that was legally binding upon both properties. Whenever you make an offer to purchase a property at X price in X number of days, you sign a similar legal document. It's called an offer to purchase. In essence, an offer to purchase is a short-term option. It is a legally binding agreement that obligates the seller to sell the property to you within a specific time frame. For example, suppose you offer to buy a $100,000 home with a closing date 60 days in the future. In essence, you have a 60-day option on this property with a locked-in price of $100,000. What if someone approached you during the 60-day period of time before you had actually taken title to the property and offered you $110,000 for your position? Could you sell your position to this new buyer and pocket the $10,000 profit? The answer is maybe. Of course, these kinds of questions should always be discussed with a competent real estate attorney. In theory, I emphasize in theory, you should be able to sell your position to another individual, who then completes the purchase in your place. To strengthen your legal position, I recommend that whenever you fill out an offer to purchase any property, you add these words to your contract, and/or assigns. For example, when I buy property in my own name, I write my name as follows: Robert G. Allan, and/or assigns. In theory, this enables me to flip my contract to someone who may want to buy it. When you sign your name to an offer, you should always include those 3 magic words after your name, and/or assigns. This gives you the right to purchase a property and/or assign your contract to someone else. With this as a backdrop, let's discuss some situations in which you could handsomely profit by flipping these properties to other buyers for profit. Case Study 1. A quick $7,000. My first flip was a 12-unit apartment building. The owners were considering selling this choice property at a price that I knew was substantially below the market. Unfortunately, the owners required a substantial down payment, which I did not have. At this point, I could have left disappointed with my inability to take advantage of an obvious bargain. Instead, I immediately pulled out an offer to purchase and proceeded to offer the sellers exactly what they wanted, cash with a 7-week closing date. As earnest money, I gave them my personal check for $500. Of course, to give myself a little cushion of protection, I also included the following phrase in my offer. This offer is subject to the inspection by my partner on or before closing. By including this subject to clause, I had an out if my partner wasn't in agreement with the purchase. Who was my partner? My spouse, my brother, anyone I designate. Now let's analyze this situation. The sellers had given me the right to control the price of the property. I had given them $500 for this right. If I didn't complete the purchase, my $500 would be forfeited. But by including the subject to the inspection of my partner clause, I had effectively eliminated my risk of losing even my earnest money. In other words, I was able to tie up this very valuable property for 7 weeks with absolutely no risk. I immediately began to canvass my friends to find someone with cash who wanted to take advantage of a fabulous bargain. I found one interested investor and explained my dilemma. I had found a bargain property but didn't have the cash to close. If this investor would come up with the cash, I would agree to flip the property to him immediately after the closing. 7 weeks later, I closed on the property using my friend's cash and, in the same escrow, flipped the property to my friend who paid me a $7,000 finder's fee. Did you get that? I made $7,000 in 7 weeks because I had the presence of mind to make an offer to purchase a property I couldn't afford. At the closing, all parties won. The sellers got their cash, my friend got a nice bargain property, I walked out with a nice finder's fee. Because this was the first time I had ever done a flip, I didn't know that I could have written those magic words and or assigns, and I would have eliminated the need to close on the property. I could have sold the paper rights and my friend could have legally closed in my place. Case Study 2. Colorado Ski Cabin. One of my students used the flipping technique to make a huge profit. He and his spouse were on a ski vacation at a famous Colorado ski resort. To be able to get a partial tax deduction for the ski trip, he spent several hours searching through real estate listings and found what I call the worst house in the best neighborhood. It was priced at $1,250,000, while other properties nearby were priced in the $2 million to $5 million range. My student was actually considering buying this property for his own personal use. He offered $800,000 cash. His offer was countered at $900,000. The offer was signed by both parties with, as I remember, a 60-day closing date. During this 60-day period, my student let the realtor know that he might consider reselling the property before the closing date. Shortly thereafter, he received an offer for $1,150,000, a full $250,000 higher than his contracted purchase price. Because he had included the phrase and or assigns, he was able to flip the property to a new buyer and reap a substantial profit after commissions. Note, my student never took title to the property, never had to obtain a new loan, never had his credit checked, never had to verify his income or down payment. He simply assigned his right to buy the property to someone else. He made a substantial amount of money without ever having owned the property. That's the advantage of the flipping technique. Ads in the paper. One of my students advertises in the newspaper for bargain properties. He offers to close quickly with fair prices. He doesn't receive many calls, but when he does, it's usually worth the bother. Once he received a phone call from a retiring couple who owned a home free and clear. The sellers wanted $150,000 purchase price with $15,000 down. They were willing to carry a first mortgage of $135,000 at 8%. After checking out the property, my student determined that it was worth at least $180,000. This had the making of a great deal. He agreed to all of the seller's terms with one exception. He negotiated for a moratorium on interest payments for the first 6 months after the purchase. The sellers agreed. The offer to purchase was signed with a closing date 6 weeks in the future. With the offer signed, my student immediately ran an ad in the paper similar to this. Must sell this week. $20,000 below market. 0% interest for 6 months. No qualifying loan for the right buyer. Hurry, this won't last. $158,000 home in good neighborhood. As you might have guessed, this investor looks for properties he can buy and flip almost immediately. In this example, he found a buyer within days. The new buyer agreed to make a $23,000 payment, of which $15,000 was given to the original sellers, and $8,000 was kept as the profit for flipping. Everybody won. The original sellers received a $15,000 down payment and payments on a first new mortgage. The new buyer bought a property substantially below market with excellent terms. The student earned a quick $8,000 profit. Whether you're flipping for cash, as in the preceding example, or flipping for cash flow, as did our Phoenix investor, flipping can be one way to create substantial profits and extra streams of income. Join me in the next chapter and I'll share with you another money-making idea.
Thanks, Bob. And again, these are some wonderful examples of real estate. And you'll notice that it's kind of fun, but some of my early real estate was in that chapter in multiple streams of income. Thanks, everybody. We're going to be right back with our next segment. Okay, Jacob.
Perfect.